The moonlight shone through two small windows and lit up a big, old room. It showed a young man lying still on a bed, wrapped in a sheet like a dead person. His face was pale, he was dead. Suddenly, his face seemed to move, but it was just the shadow of the curtain. The door opened, and a girl came in quietly. She kissed the cold lips of the dead man, looking both sad and proud. His face seemed to move again, but it was only the curtain. Another girl came in. The two girls stood by the bed, one strong and proud, the other soft and weak. "Go away," said the proud girl. "He is mine now that he is dead." The other girl said, "Yes, he is yours." The proud girl looked angry, but the gentle girl sat by the dead man's side. She was very sad. "Edith," called the proud girl. Edith stood up and said, "I will keep quiet until the dead speaks. Go live your life and come back later. We will both forgive you then." "What will be the sign?" asked the proud girl. Edith took a lock of the dead man's hair and said, "This will be the sign." The girls held hands over the dead man. They agreed to meet again far in the future. The proud girl left, looking back as if she thought the dead man frowned at her. Many years passed, and everything seemed different from the night when the two girls stood by the dead man. One of the girls became very old and was known as the Old Maid in the Winding Sheet. She lived alone and never came outside, except to follow funerals. Every time someone died, she would walk behind the funeral, wearing a long white dress like a shroud. She was quiet, gentle, and sad, and the people in the town had grown used to seeing her at funerals. They believed it was a bad sign if she wasn't there. Sometimes, she would visit graves at night and stretch out her arms as if she were giving blessings. People thought she brought flowers from heaven, as the graves she visited stayed green even in the snow. One day, the town was busy with people going about their day. The streets were full of merchants, sailors, and other townspeople. Near an old, empty mansion, someone noticed a figure wearing a long white dress. "I see a strange figure," said a sailor, pointing at the woman in white. Others also noticed her, and soon, everyone was talking quietly about the strange sight. "Is there a funeral today?" people asked as they watched the Old Maid in the Winding Sheet. They looked around for signs of death, no hearse, no bell, no mourners in black, yet she was there, always linked to funerals. The people were puzzled and worried, feeling like something bad might happen. As she walked through the town, people made way for her. She was old, pale, and thin, dressed in a long white robe. A little boy ran toward her, but when she looked at him with a strange expression, he stopped, unsure and scared. Some said she was like a ghost, and that even a child couldn't touch her. The old maid walked up to an empty mansion, knocked on the door 3 times. People wondered why she would go there, as no one had lived in the house for many years. An old man told her that the house had been empty since Colonel Fenwick died long ago. She knocked again, and suddenly, they heard slow footsteps inside the house. The door opened, and the old maid disappeared inside. People were left wondering who opened the door, as some old men thought it was a ghost of a former slave named Caesar, who had died 30 years ago. "She has awakened a servant of the old family," someone said. half jokingly. "Let's wait," said another. "More visitors will come soon. Maybe we should open the graveyard gate." As the evening set in, the crowd slowly started to leave. Just then, a coach, something rare in those days, entered the street. It was old-fashioned and heavy, with a serious-looking driver and footman. The coach made a deep rumbling sound as it rolled to the deserted mansion. "Whose coach is this?" asked someone. The footman didn't reply, but knocked 3 times on the door with the iron hammer. Then he opened the coach door. An old man, who knew a lot about family symbols, looked at the shield on the side of the coach. He whispered that it belonged to a rich family whose last member had recently died. The coach must belong to his widow, he explained. Before more could be said, an old, grand lady stepped out of the coach. She looked proud but sad, with a face that scared the crowd. She climbed the steps, leaning on a cane, and the door opened for her. A torchlight shone on her fine clothes as she went inside. The man who had spoken about the family saw that the torch was held by a figure that looked like old Caesar, a former servant. But the grin on the figure's face was so scary, it would haunt him forever. The coach drove away with a loud noise. The crowd wondered if everything the coach, the old lady, Caesar, and the old maid was just some strange trick. More people gathered, looking up at the house, now lit by the moon. Some old people told stories about the once great family who used to live there. The stories were so vivid that a few people felt like they heard the knocker again, 3 more times. "Impossible," some people exclaimed. "The moon is shining, and there's no one under the porch." "Did the door open?" one person whispered. "Did you see it too?" asked another, surprised. Most people didn't believe anyone else had knocked at the door. However, a few said they saw a red light, like a torch, in the window, as if someone was being led up the stairs. But others thought it was just their imagination. Suddenly, everyone froze in fear. They had heard a terrifying scream from inside the mansion, followed by complete silence. No one knew if they should run away or go inside to solve the mystery. While they were scared, they felt calmer when their clergyman arrived. He was an old, wise man who had guided them for years, with white hair and a beard, leaning on his staff. The clergyman decided to enter the mansion to make sure the old maid in the winding sheet was okay. He went up the steps with a torchbearer who had spoken earlier about the family's shield and recognized the old servant, Caesar. They knocked 3 times, but received no response. "It seems old Caesar no longer serves here," said the priest. "It must have been something pretending to be Caesar," the other man replied. "God's will be done," said the clergyman as he opened the door. They began climbing the stairs. As they went up, the old clergyman acted as if he were moving through a crowd, bowing and stepping aside as if greeting people. At the top of the stairs, he prepared to say a prayer. "Shouldn't we ask the people to join us in prayer?" asked his companion. The old clergyman looked around, confused. "Are we alone? I thought I was praying for all the people who had passed away, like I did many times before. I saw their spirits, and the old maid in the winding sheet had led them to their graves." Now fully aware of their task, the clergyman tapped his staff hard on the floor, but no one answered from the empty rooms. They walked down the hallway and stopped by a large front window, looking out at the crowd below in the moonlight. There was an open door to their right and a closed one to their left. The clergyman pointed to the closed door and said, "I once sat by the deathbed of a young man in this room." Suddenly, he seemed very excited by a memory, grabbed the torch, and threw open the door so fast that the flame went out. The only light now came from the moon shining through two windows. In the moonlight, they saw the old maid in the winding sheet sitting in a tall wooden chair, her hands crossed on her chest, and her head leaning back. Kneeling at her feet was the grand old lady they had seen earlier, her head resting on the old maid's lap. One hand was on the floor, the other was clutching a lock of hair, once black but now green with age. As they entered the room, the old maid's face seemed to change expressions as if she might explain everything. But it was just the shadow of a torn curtain moving between her face and the moonlight. "Both are dead," the clergyman said sadly. "Who will reveal the secret now? It feels like the answer is in my mind, flickering like the light on her face. But now it's gone."